What if the place you ran to, hoping only for safety, became the first place where you learned what desire without fear felt like? The dust tasted like iron as Laya Hart stepped onto Thunder Rim Ranch. The New Mexico sun rose sharp across the horizon, slicing through the early morning with a heat that made her eyes water. She pressed her cracked lips together and squared her shoulders. This land felt wild and unforgiving, but she had known worse. She had walked away from worse. The adobe ranch house sat low, its pale walls weathered to the color of old bone. A windmill creaked lazily in the breeze, and the dirt yard stretched out empty. Laya adjusted the leather satchel on her shoulder. It held everything she owned, and even that was not much. "You the one looking for work?" She turned. The man stepping out of the barn carried the weight of the land in his posture. Tall, lean, quiet. Muscles carved by work, not pride. His gray eyes studied her. Not hungry, not cruel, just careful. "I am," she answered. "I'm Boon Calder," he said. "Cook, clean, mend. Room and board plus $2 a week. No questions asked, none answered. That suit you?" Laya nodded. "It suits me fine." She was grateful he didn't look too long at the faded dress or the mended seams. Grateful he didn't comment on the calluses on her hands or the tight way she held herself, like a woman who'd learned to brace before a blow. Before she could say more, an older man stepped out into the light. "This here's Dusty Cole," Boone said. "He'll show you around." Dusty touched the brim of his hat with a kindness that made her throat tighten. "Welcome to Thunder Rim, miss!" It's rough land, but honest land. Inside the kitchen, Laya saw chaos left by years of bachelor living. Thick dust on the shelves, grease on the walls. Dishes piled everywhere. But she had lived through worse. The neglect here wasn't cruelty. It was loneliness. Dusty brought water, and together they cleaned. Laya worked with practiced movements, losing herself in scrubbing and sorting. Cleaning made sense. Cleaning fixed things. Cleaning pushed the past back for a little while. But when her sleeve slid up her arm, she froze. The faded bruises glared yellow-green against her skin. Old marks. Old memories. She yanked the sleeve down. Dusty pretended not to notice. Kindness again. When he left to fetch more water, Laya touched the cold silver locket around her neck. She never opened it. Not anymore. Some memories were better locked away. By noon, the kitchen smelled of cornbread and beans simmering on the stove. Dusty returned and lifted his head like a man catching the scent of heaven. Boone stepped in behind him, washed clean from the pump outside. Water droplets stuck to his hair. "This is fine," Boone said quietly as he ate. "Real fine." It wasn't much praise, but from him it felt like a whole sunrise. When the men returned to their work, Laya wandered outside with a bucket. Sunlight baked the earth until it gleamed like fired clay. She lowered the bucket into the well, pulling hand over hand. Her sleeve snagged. It slid up. The bruises showed again. She heard footsteps behind her. Boone's. He stopped the moment he saw her arm. "Let me," he said, voice tight. "I can manage." "I said, let me." But he didn't reach for her. His fists were clenched at his sides, jaw-locked, eyes filled with anger. But not at her. A man like Boone didn't waste anger on the wrong things. His anger was for whoever had hurt her, whoever had left those marks. He hauled the bucket up with fast, controlled movements. When he set it down, he looked at her with something like a promise. "That won't happen here," he said, "not on my land." She swallowed. "I know." For the first time in a long time, she meant it. Later that afternoon, she began hanging laundry behind the house when a buggy appeared on the road. A woman in a black dress and stiff bonnet climbed down. Agnes Whitlow. Hard eyes. Harder mouth. "You're the woman living with 2 unmarried men?" Agnes demanded. "It looks improper. People talk." Laya held her ground. "People always talk." Before Agnes could argue further, the kitchen door opened and Boone appeared. He filled the doorway like a shield. "Miss Hart works here," he said, voice flat and cold. "That's all anyone needs to know." Agnes faltered under his gaze. She left in a swirl of offended skirts and dust. Laya watched her go, surprised at how steady she felt. Maybe it was the ranch. Maybe Boone's quiet protection. Maybe the way this place made her feel like she had a right to stand her ground. That evening, Boone brought her a knife in a leather sheath. Strong gloves for work, too. For safety, he said simply. She took them with a soft, "Thank you." He didn't pry. He didn't demand. He just left a lantern burning in the barn loft, his silent way of keeping watch, so she felt safe on her first night. When she lay down in her small room behind a locked door, she finally breathed deep. The house smelled faintly of fresh cornbread and soap. The shutters rattled in the wind, but inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, safe. She touched the locket one last time. Tomorrow she'd scrub the parlor. Tomorrow she'd start a garden. Tomorrow she'd make this place livable. Not forever, but maybe long enough to remember what peace felt like. Thunder Rim Ranch held its breath under the stars, and Laya Hart, ghosts and all, slowly began to believe she had found a place where a woman like her could stop running. For now. What if the danger you feared the most wasn't the one riding toward you, but the one already watching from the shadows? 3 days after Laya settled into life at Thunder Rim Ranch, the peace cracked. It came on a morning when the sky looked harmless, soft pink and lavender over the long stretch of New Mexico land. She was tending the kitchen garden, coaxing life out of hard soil, when she heard wagon wheels rattling fast toward the house. A small buggy appeared. Dust flew behind it like a warning flag. It wasn't Agnes this time. It was fear. The woman driving was Mrs. Henderson, her face pale and tight. Beside her, young Tim Henderson gripped the dashboard, eyes wide. "Boone!" Mrs. Henderson called. "Please!" Boone was out of the barn before she even finished shouting. "What happened?" he asked. "They dammed the creek," Mrs. Henderson gasped. "Pike's men. Said our water belongs to the railroad now. Said we had to pay to water our own cattle," my husband argued. "They knocked him down. Tim rode to get help." Laya's hands went cold. Water meant life out here. Losing it meant losing everything. Boone didn't hesitate. "Dusty, saddle 2 horses. Laya, pack supplies." "I'm coming?" she asked. He looked at her, the set of his jaw grim. "Mrs. Henderson might need doctoring. You're the best we've got." She didn't argue. She grabbed bandages, herbs, and the small tin of salve she'd made from mint and sage. When she emerged, Boone was strapping his rifle to his saddle. "You stay behind me," he said. "If there's trouble." "I know," she answered, "but I'm coming." They rode. The land burned hot under the noon sun. Dust rose under the horses' hooves. Tim led the way, pushing his tired animal as fast as it could go. Laya prayed he didn't fall. Boone kept his pace slow enough for her to keep up, but fast enough to tell her he feared what they would find. The Henderson ranch appeared at last. The creek bed, usually a shining ribbon of water, was blocked by a crude dam built of logs and rocks. 2 men lounged beside it, rifles across their laps. "This is railroad property now," one shouted as they approached. "Turn around, Calder." "Like hell it is," Boone said. "That water belongs to Henderson." "Not anymore." Laya saw movement near the porch. Mrs. Henderson was helping her husband sit upright. Blood stained his temple. "I'm going to them," Laya whispered. "You go," Boone said, "but stay low." She dismounted and walked as though the rifles didn't exist. Calm, controlled. She'd learned a long time ago that fear made predators bold. "Afternoon," she said gently as she knelt beside Mr. Henderson. "Let's look at that cut." The man grimaced. "They came at dawn, said we signed papers. I never signed anything, never would." "I believe you," she said softly. From behind her, she heard Boone speaking firmly with Pike's men. His voice remained steady, but she recognized the edge in it. The same edge that had appeared when he saw her bruises. A shot cracked across the air. Laya froze. But it wasn't aimed at anyone, just the sky. A warning. "Enough!" Dusty's voice rang behind them. Sheriff Tate arrived seconds later, riding hard with 6 townsmen behind him. He took one look at the dam, the rifles, the Hendersons, fear, and Pike's forged papers, and shook his head. "This is nonsense," he said. "These papers are fake. Tear that dam down and clear out." Pike's men grumbled but obeyed. Soon the creek was flowing again, muddy at first, then clean. Boone mounted up. "Let's get home. This isn't over." The ride back to Thunder Rim was quiet. The sun felt meaner than usual. Laya's stomach knotted tight. She had a feeling this trouble would grow roots. That evening, when supper was barely on the table, Dusty stormed in. "Mason Pike's stirring things," he warned. "Telling folks Boone can't run a ranch proper if he keeps a strange woman on his land. Says it's improper. Says maybe the railroad should take control of the water rights." Laya's breath caught. "I could leave." "No," Boone said. The word slammed across the table, hard and final. "You are not leaving because of gossip." She swallowed. "I don't want you losing the ranch because of me." His eyes locked on hers. "You're not the problem. Pike is. Seth is. Men who want control always look for something to blame. But you've brought life back into this place." Dusty nodded. "Boy's right." Laya felt something warm stir inside her, something she'd not felt in years. Safety, maybe even belonging. The next afternoon, Laya was hanging wash when 3 cowboys from the Double Bar Ranch rode up, drunk, mean-eyed. "Well, look here," the leader sneered. The mystery woman herself. Laya kept her hand steady on the laundry. "Ranch business is down at the barn." "Our business," the man said, stepping closer, "is with you." Before she could speak, the kitchen door slammed open. Boone stepped out, rifle in hand, jaw carved from stone. "Get gone," he said. 2 words, cold. "Certain." The cowboys hesitated. They looked at the barrel of his rifle, at his eyes, then rode off. Laya let out a slow breath. "You hurt?" Boone asked. "No. They were just talking." Quote, "They were doing more than that." She touched his arm lightly. "You didn't give them an excuse to come back with more men. That was smart." He looked at her hand like it was something rare. Dusty joined them on the porch, and one look at his face told Laya the trouble wasn't done. "Mason Pike sent surveyors to the North Ridge," Dusty said. "Railroad business. They're measuring water flow. Talking big." "They're trying to take our water," Boone said grimly. Laya felt cold creep into her bones. "Can they?" "If we can't find my father's old water right papers," Boone said, "they'll bury us in legal tricks." "I'll help you look," she said. Boone studied her, then nodded once. They spent the next morning digging through stacks of dusty ledgers and old receipts in Boone's father's study. Hours passed. Papers piled. Dust rose. Then, "Here," Boone said, "an oilskin packet, sealed, labeled. Water rights, 1861. She felt relief sweep through her. "You found it!" Before they could celebrate, pounding hooves thundered into the yard. Dusty pulled a slumped young boy from his saddle. "Trouble," he said. "Henderson sent word. Pike's men dammed the creek again. They hit him. Hard." Laya grabbed her basket of medicines. "Let's go!" Boone hesitated only a heartbeat. "All right, but stay behind me." They rode into trouble again, the sun burning overhead, dust rising around them. And as they approached the Henderson ranch, Laya felt the weight of something new settling on her heart. Not fear, not dread, something deeper, something dangerous. She wasn't just fighting for safety anymore. She was fighting for Thunder Rim. For the ranch. For the men who'd sheltered her. For the man whose quiet strength had begun to feel like home. What if the storm you feared would destroy you was the very one that revealed who would fight beside you, even when danger came for your soul? The day the sky turned dark without warning, Laya knew something terrible was coming. She had been mending harness in the barn when the first fat raindrops hit the roof in heavy, uneven thuds. Within seconds, the world shifted. The wind roared like a living thing. Lightning split the sky, and rain poured down in sheets thick as curtains. "Where's Boone?" she shouted as Dusty fought to close a loose barn door. "North fence," Dusty yelled, pointing into the storm. "Said he'd be back before the creek rose." Fear slammed into her chest. The arroyo was a dry ditch most of the year, but in a storm like this, it turned deadly. Flash floods came down it like a stampede of water and destruction. Without thinking, Laya grabbed her shawl and ran into the storm. The rain hit her like fists. The wind nearly knocked her sideways. Mud sucked at her boots, and water blurred the world to nothing. But she saw him, Boone, wrestling a section of broken fence that whipped back and forth in the wind. "Boone!" she shouted, though her voice barely carried. He looked up, startled, rain streaming down his face. "What are you doing out here?" he shouted. "Get back to the house!" "The arroyo!" she screamed. "Flash flood coming." The new sound, low, rolling thunder, wasn't thunder at all. It was water, racing fast, tearing down the arroyo like a living monster. Boone's eyes snapped toward it. Even through the storm's roar, they heard it coming. "Run!" he ordered. They bolted up the rise, slipping, stumbling through mud and water as the roaring flood crashed down behind them. Trees, branches, rocks, everything the mountains couldn't hold, raced through the torrent. They reached high ground, just as the flood tore across the land where Boone had stood moments earlier. The ground shook. Laya grabbed his hand. He grabbed hers back, fingers tight, like a lifeline. They stood gasping in the rain, soaked to the bone, hearts pounding. He touched her face with a shaking hand. "You saved my life." She shook her head, breathless. "Don't think about it." He didn't let go of her hand. He led her through the storm to the line shack, a tiny, abandoned building on higher ground. They stumbled inside, dripping water everywhere. The one-room space was dim, dusty, but solid. Boone quickly got a fire going with old wood stacked beside the stove. Laya's teeth chattered as she wrung water from her dress. "You came into the storm for me," Boone said quietly as he fed kindling to the flames. "I wasn't letting that flood take you." He pulled a blanket from a peg and wrapped it around her shoulders. His hands lingered there, warm and gentle despite the shaking in them. "You don't know what it did to me," he said softly, "thinking I might lose you before anything even began." Her breath caught. She turned toward him, the firelight warming her skin, his nearness warming something deeper. "I need to tell you something," she whispered. "About Seth. About my marriage." "You don't have to." "I do." She steadied herself. "Because I need you to understand why trusting someone is hard for me." Her voice trembled as years of pain rose to the surface. "On our wedding night, Seth showed me what kind of man he was. He hurt me because he could. For 3 years he owned me. Or thought he did. When I ran, I swore no man would ever have that power again." Boone's jaw tightened. His hands balled into fists, but his voice was steady. "I'd kill him if he were here." Quote, "I know," she said softly, "but he's not here, and I'm tired of him standing between me and any chance at happiness." She looked up into Boone's eyes. "You're not him. You never were." Something broke in him at her words. Not pain, something softer, deeper. "I don't know pretty words," he said, "but you brought my home back to life. Brought me back to life. Every morning I wake up hoping to hear your footsteps in the kitchen." She lifted a trembling hand to his cheek. "I don't need pretty words." Their lips met, soft at first, then deeper as the storm raged outside. His hands slid into her wet hair, and she pressed close, feeling safe for the first time in years. When they pulled apart, she bit her lip. A nervous habit, but the fear was gone. "Cowboy," she whispered, heart racing. "What happens after I undress?" His eyes darkened, but his smile was gentle. "Then you'll know desire," he said softly, "the kind where you're precious. The kind that stops the second you say to stop. The kind you choose." Her eyes filled with tears, not fear, relief. "Show me," she whispered. He did, slowly, gently, letting her set every pace. When she helped him out of his shirt, he held still, letting her choose. When he helped her from her soaked dress, his hands were reverent, not possessive. Wrapped in blankets on the narrow bed, they came together with tenderness she had never known. Every kiss was a promise, every touch an answer. He showed her a kind of desire that healed instead of harmed. She gave him a kind of warmth he hadn't felt since boyhood. Outside, the storm slammed against the earth. Inside, they built something quiet and sacred. After, she fell asleep against his chest, feeling safe in a way she never dreamed possible. When the rain stopped near midnight, they dressed slowly, shy and glowing in the firelight. They walked back to the ranch hand in hand, mud sucking at their boots, storm damage scattered everywhere. Dusty met them with relief written all over his face. A fire had burned part of the ridge, but thanks to the shifting wind, the ranch survived. Laya spent the next day helping rebuild fence lines, bringing food to tired men, binding burned hands. She felt steady, strong. She felt like she belonged. That night, Boone found her at the well under a soft moon. "Laya," he said quietly, "we're building something here. Not just fences, not just water rights, something real." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "This was my mother's," he said. "Been saving it for the right woman." Inside was a plain gold ring, worn smooth with years of love. "I want you," he said, "not as housekeeper, not as someone to protect, as my wife, my partner, my heart. Will you marry me?" Laya touched the locket at her throat one last time, then lifted it off. She set it gently on the rail. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Boon Calder, I will." He slipped the ring on her finger, and it felt like something in her life finally fit. Their wedding took place 3 days later. Simple, honest, surrounded by townsfolk who had become family. Sheriff Tate officiated. Dusty wept openly. Even Agnes Whitlow smiled. Boone kissed her when the sheriff said he could, slow and sure in front of the whole valley, and Laya Hart became Laya Calder. The storms of her past finally washed away. Thunder Rim Ranch bloomed under the heat of a New Mexico sun, but more under the warmth of two people who chose each other every single day. A place that once held only dust and loneliness now held a home. A family. A future. And through it all, Laya and Boone walked side by side, not owned, not afraid, but finally free.